Throughout the month of August, when the Church celebrates so many Marian devotions, from the Assumption to Our Lady of the Angels, we ask ourselves, why has the Blessed Virgin Mary chosen to manifest herself so many times throughout history? We've decided to explore this beautiful topic, given the numerous celebrations honoring Blessed Mary during this sacred time, recognizing that each apparition approved by the Holy Mother Church represents an extraordinary moment where heaven touches earth, where the Mother of God draws near to her children to guide them, to comfort them, and to remind them of the path to her Son, Jesus Christ. Chapter 1. Guadalupe, Mexico, 1531. The Mother of the Americas reveals herself to the humble Juan Diego on the lands of Tepeyac Hill, where a pagan temple once stood. Divine Providence had prepared an encounter that would forever change the history of the Americas. It was the year 1531, barely 4 decades after the arrival of the Spaniards, when an indigenous man named Juan Diego was walking toward Tlatelolco to attend Holy Mass. The morning air of December 9th carried something special, a presence that would soon reveal itself as the sweetest of all mothers. As he ascended the hill, Juan Diego heard celestial music emanating from the summit. It was a song so beautiful, it seemed to surpass that of all the most melodious birds in the world. When the music ceased, a gentle and maternal voice called him by name from above, Juanito, Juan Dieguito. Turning his gaze toward the source of the voice, he encountered a vision he could never forget. A beautiful lady, radiant as the sun, dressed in a manner that revealed her noble dignity. The apparition of the Virgin Mary to Juan Diego was not merely a supernatural event, but an act of maternal love toward an entire continent that was beginning to receive the light of the gospel. The Blessed Virgin presented herself as the mother of the true God by whom we live, using concepts that the Nahuatl heart could perfectly understand. Her mestizo face, her attire full of symbols that spoke to both indigenous and Spanish culture, revealed the divine plan to unite all peoples under her maternal mantle. The miracle of Juan Diego's tilma, where the sacred image was imprinted, constitutes one of the most extraordinary signs God has granted His Church. Scientific studies have confirmed that the image was not painted by human hands, that the colors remain vibrant after nearly 500 years, and that the Virgin's eyes reflect the figures of those present at the moment of the miracle. This image became the primary instrument for the evangelization of Mexico, achieving the conversion of millions of indigenous people to Christianity in just a few years. Guadalupe devotion transformed not only the spiritual life of Mexico, but spread throughout Latin America, becoming the heart of continental Catholic identity. The Virgin of Guadalupe is proclaimed patroness of the Americas, and her feast day on December 12th unites millions of faithful who recognize in her the mother who especially cares for the poorest and simplest among us. Her message of love and hope continues to resonate in our day, reminding us that God chooses the humble to accomplish the greatest works of His kingdom. Chapter 2. The Miraculous Medal, Paris, 1830, Saint Catherine Labouré and the Heavenly Gift for All Humanity. In the heart of Paris, in the midst of a France still recovering from the traumas of the Revolution, lived a young novice of the Daughters of Charity named Catherine Labouré. She was a simple woman of deep prayer who had come to the convent on Rue du Bac following God's call to serve the poor. What Catherine did not know was that Providence had chosen her to receive one of the most precious gifts that Blessed Mary would give to humanity, the Miraculous Medal. On the night of July 18, 1830, while the sisters slept, Catherine was awakened by the presence of a luminous child who invited her to follow him to the chapel. There, in the sacred silence of the temple, the Blessed Virgin Mary awaited her, seated beside the altar like a mother waiting for her daughter. For 2 hours, Mary spoke with Catherine as a mother speaks with her favorite daughter, entrusting her with secrets about the difficult times ahead for France and the Church, but also promises of protection and special blessings. On November 27, 1830, a date that would forever be etched in the history of Marian devotion, the Virgin appeared again to St. Catherine during evening prayer. This time, Mary stood, dressed in white and blue, with rays of light emanating from her outstretched hands. Her feet rested on a terrestrial globe, crushing the head of a serpent. Around the vision appeared the words, "O Mary, conceived without sin, pray for us who have recourse to thee." The Virgin then showed Catherine the reverse side of the medal, the letter M crowned by a cross, the Sacred Hearts of Jesus and Mary, and 12 stars representing the 12 apostles and the 12 tribes of Israel. Each element had a profound meaning. The M represented the name of Mary. The cross recalled the redemption wrought by Christ. The hearts symbolized the infinite love of Jesus and Mary for humanity, and the stars indicated that Mary is the new Eve who crushes the head of the ancient serpent. The impact of the miraculous medal was immediate and extraordinary. Millions of copies were spread throughout the world, accompanied by spectacular conversions, miraculous healings, and special graces. The medal became a sacramental cherished by the faithful of all social classes, from emperors to the poorest of the poor. St. Catherine herself, who remained anonymous for decades, was a silent witness to how Mary's gift transformed lives and strengthened faith in times of persecution. Chapter 3, La Salette, France, 1846, the mother's tears for the conversion of her children. In the mountains of the French Alps, where the pure air and the beauty of the landscape naturally lift the spirit toward God, 2 young shepherds lived oblivious to the great events of the world. Emily Carter, 15 years old, and Max Miller, 11, were simple children who tended cattle in the heights near the small village of La Salette. On September 19, 1846, while searching for their cows after their afternoon rest, they would encounter a vision that would mark their lives forever and deeply move the universal church. On a rock, enveloped in a brilliant light, a beautiful woman appeared, weeping bitterly, her face in her hands. Children approached without fear, drawn by a mixture of compassion and curiosity. When the mysterious lady raised her face, they could see she wore a resplendent white gown, a yellow apron, a white shawl over her shoulders, and a crown of roses on her head. A crucifix shone on her chest, surrounded by instruments of the Passion, hammer, tongs, and nails. The beautiful lady began speaking to the shepherd children in French, but then switched to the local dialect to ensure they understood her message perfectly. Her words revealed the maternal sorrow of one who sees her children stray from the path of salvation. "If my people will not submit, I'm forced to drop the arm of my son," she confided. "It is so strong, so heavy, that I can no longer bear it." She explained how the sins of men, especially blasphemy and the profanation of Sunday, attracted divine punishment. The message of La Salette was an urgent call to conversion, but also a maternal promise of intercession. The Virgin explained to the children how the harvests were failing, how infant mortality was rising, and how these sufferings were a consequence of turning away from God. However, her weeping was not one of despair, but of a mother's love suffering for her wayward children. "Make this known to all my people," she charged them before rising towards heaven and disappearing into the light. The apparition of La Salette was officially recognized by the Church in 1851, and since then it has become a pilgrimage site, where thousands of faithful come to hear the maternal call to conversion. The sanctuary built on the site of the apparition reminds all visitors that Mary is the mother who weeps for our sins, but who also constantly intercedes with her Son to obtain forgiveness and mercy. The message of La Salette remains profoundly relevant, inviting each generation to examine its conscience and to return to the heart of the Gospel. Chapter 4. Lourdes, France, 1858. The Immaculate Conception appears to Saint Bernadette in the small village of Lourdes. At the foot of the Pyrenees lived a family so poor they often had no bread to eat. The Soubirous family had known better times, but the illness of Francois, the father, and economic hardships had led them to live in a damp and dark cellar that had once served as a prison. In this family, the eldest daughter, Bernadette, a 14-year-old girl suffering from asthma, was notable for her simple piety and gentle nature, although her education had been neglected due to the family's poverty. On Thursday of February 11th, 1858, while searching for firewood with her sister and a friend near the Massabielle grotto, Bernadette heard a sound like wind, but the trees remained motionless. Looking up towards the grotto, she saw in a niche of the rock a most beautiful young woman, dressed in white with a blue sash, holding a rosary in her hands and greeting her with a heavenly smile. The girl fell to her knees and began to pray the rosary, while the vision made the same gestures, although without moving her lips. During 18 apparitions that extended until July 1858, the Blessed Virgin Mary conversed with Bernadette in the local dialect, always treating her with the courtesy shown to important people, saying, "Voulez-vous me faire la grâce? Will you do me the favor?" The messages were simple but profound. Pray for sinners, do penance, kiss the ground for the conversion of sinners, and especially dig in the earth where a miraculous spring would flow. The spring, which initially was just a trickle of muddy water, soon became a crystal-clear fountain that has not ceased to flow to this day. The most extraordinary moment came on March 25th, the Feast of the Annunciation, when Bernadette insistently asked the vision who she was. After 3 requests, the beautiful lady clasped her hands, raised her eyes to heaven, and uttered these immortal words, "Que soy era Immaculada Concepciu." I am the Immaculate Conception. Bernadette, who did not know this theological expression, ran to repeat these words to the parish priest, thus confirming that the one who appeared to her was truly the Mother of God. Officially proclaimed as the Immaculate Conception just 4 years earlier by Pope Pius IX, the miracles of Lourdes began immediately and continue to this day, making it one of the most important pilgrimage sites in the Catholic world. Millions of sick have drunk from the spring water or bathed in the pools, and thousands of inexplicable cures have been scientifically documented. But more important than the physical miracles is the spiritual miracle that takes place in each pilgrim, the personal encounter with Mary Immaculate, which always leads to her Son, Jesus. Lourdes reminds us that God chooses the smallest and simplest to manifest His glory, and that Mary is truly the health of the sick and the refuge of sinners. Chapter 5. Knock, Ireland, 1879. The eloquent silence of Mary in Irish lands. In Green Ireland, where the Catholic faith had survived centuries of persecution, and where every hill and valley held memories of martyrs and saints, there existed a small parish called Knock in County Mayo. It was a rural community, poor but deeply devout, that kept the Irish Catholic tradition alive despite the political and social difficulties facing the island. On August 21st, 1879, a date that would forever be etched in Irish history, divine providence had prepared a heavenly manifestation that would strengthen the faith of an entire people. Margaret Byrne, a devout woman of 45, was returning from visiting a family in the parish when, as she passed in front of the church, she noticed a strange light emanating from the south wall of the temple. Approaching, she beheld an extraordinary vision. The Blessed Virgin Mary, Saint Joseph, and Saint John the Evangelist appeared beside an altar, on which stood a lamb surrounded by angels. The vision was of indescribable beauty, but what most impressed Margaret was that the heavenly figures spoke no words. Quickly, Margaret ran to tell her neighbors, and soon 15 people of different ages, from children to the elderly, and gathered, and for 2 hours they contemplated the same vision under the torrential rain that fell that night. Mary appeared dressed in white, with a large crown on her head, and her hands outstretched in prayer. St. Joseph at her right bowed respectfully, while St. John the Evangelist, dressed as a bishop, held an open book and seemed to preach. Above the altar, the Lamb of God was surrounded by angels, constantly fluttering their wings. The most remarkable aspect of the Knock apparition was precisely its silence. In a time when Ireland suffered great hardships, when poverty and forced emigration tore families apart, when the Catholic faith was constantly challenged, Mary did not come to pronounce words of reproach or warning. Instead, she offered the Irish faithful a vision of heaven itself, the communion of saints, the celestial liturgy, the Lamb that takes away the sin of the world. It was as if a veil had been lifted, and the witnesses could contemplate the eternal reality that gives meaning to all earthly sufferings. The silent message of Knock resonated deeply within the Irish soul. The apparition was rigorously investigated and approved by the Church, becoming Ireland's first national Marian shrine. Pilgrims began to arrive from all corners of the island and the world, finding in Knock not only miraculous healings, but especially a profound peace and a strengthening of faith. The vision of Mary in prayer, of St. Joseph in adoration, of St. John preaching, and of the Lamb on the altar reminded everyone that earthly life, however hard it may be, finds its full meaning only when contemplated from the perspective of eternity. Chapter 6. Fatima, Portugal, 1917. Celestial Secrets, entrusted to 3 shepherd children. In the small village of Fatima, in the heart of Portugal, 3 shepherd children lived the simple lives of rural families in the 20th century. Lucia dos Santos, 10 years old, and her cousins Francisco and Jacinta Marto, 9 and 7 years old respectively, tended their family's sheep in the mountainous region of Serra de Aire. They were pious children, accustomed to praying the rosary while watching the flocks, unaware that they were being prepared by Providence to receive one of the most important revelations in the history of the Church. On May 13, 1917, while the shepherd children played after lunch in the Cova da Iria, 2 flashes of lightning illuminated the serene sky, followed by the appearance of a lady brighter than the sun, dressed entirely in white and suspended above a small holm oak. Her face, of indescribable beauty, radiated a gentle light that did not hurt their eyes. With a maternal but firm voice, she asked them if they were willing to offer sacrifices to God for the conversion of sinners and in reparation for the sins that offend him. The children accepted without hesitation. During 6 monthly apparitions that lasted until October 1917, the Blessed Virgin Mary entrusted the shepherd children with messages of extraordinary importance for the entire world. She asked them to pray the rosary every day for world peace and the end of the war, and revealed 3 secrets that would remain a fundamental part of the message of Fatima. The first secret showed a vision of hell. The second prophesied the end of World War I, but warned of a worse war if men did not cease to offend God. The third, fully revealed only in the year 2000, referred to the suffering of the Church, and especially to the attack against Pope John Paul II. The miracle of the sun, promised by the Virgin and witnessed by approximately 70,000 people on October 13, 1917, was one of the most extraordinary supernatural manifestations in modern history. The sun seemed to detach itself from the firmament, spinning on itself and projecting rays of color onto the multitude, before plunging towards the earth in what many believed to be the end of the world. Then, the star returned to its normal position, and the people, who had been drenched by the rain, found themselves completely dry. This prodigy was witnessed not only by believers, but also by skeptics and journalists who had come to disprove the apparitions. The message of Fatima transcends its historical period and remains profoundly relevant, the devotion to the Immaculate Heart of Mary, the practice of the First Saturday Communion of Reparation, the consecration of Russia to the Immaculate Heart of Mary, and especially the constant call to conversion and penance, are central elements of contemporary Catholic spirituality. The three shepherd children, elevated to the altars as Saints Francisco and Jacinta and Blessed Lucia, continue to be models of Christian life for children and adults, reminding us that holiness is within reach of all those who generously respond to Mary's call. Chapter 7, Beuraying, Belgium, 1932-1933, the Virgin of the Golden Heart and her call to prayer. In the small Belgian town of Beuraying, near the French border, the life of a Catholic community, like so many others in Europe, was peacefully unfolding, facing the challenges of modern times. It was 1932, and the world was going through a deep economic crisis that affected millions of families. In this context, 5 children from 2 neighboring families, Fernande, Gilberte, and Albert Voisin, along with André and Gilberte Desjambres, were heading, as they did every afternoon, to pick up Sister André at the convent of the Sisters of Christian Doctrine. On November 29, 1932, while waiting in the convent courtyard, the children noticed a strange light above the crown of a hawthorn tree.